the topic that I want to talk about, I think, is very fitting for Earth Day, which is just around the corner, a few days away. Starting off, just take a couple seconds to look around you and notice everything that is made of plastic. There's probably a lot of stuff. Maybe parts of your laptop are made of plastic, and that's getting a good use maybe, but say if you use plastic water bottles, that is absolutely pointless and ridiculous. There's no reason that people need to be using plastic water bottles, because number one, you're not getting any benefit out of it. Majority of the water in plastic water bottles is tap water. And if you tell me that you recycle your plastic water bottles, that means absolutely nothing to me, because in the entire world, only 9% of all plastic is recycled every year. So even if you are recycling it, there's also that chance where it doesn't get recycled because of contamination and stuff like that at the recycling facilities. Recycling really is, it's better than throwing it in the landfill, but it's not that great. It is the responsibility of humans, as the most conscious being on the planet, to recognize the plastic waste, first of all, that we create and do something about it. So plastic was created because there was a need to replace ivory in billiard balls in the 1860s after the American Civil War. And so there was a $10,000 reward to anyone who could create a material that could replace the ivory, which is great because we don't want to use ivory, but also not great because it led to the production of plastic. John Wesley Hyatt created the first commercial plastic. I mean, I bet John really didn't know what he was doing, that he was going to affect the entire world with his creation of celluloid. Celluloid started being reworked into better plastics. One of the most popular types of plastic was called Bakelite. Before the 1940s, 200,000 tons of Bakelite were produced in the United States, which is a lot of plastic just at the beginning of the start of plastic. Everyone realized that this was a really great material that they could use and throw away, right? Because as a living being, we want to take the easiest way out. So from 1960 to 2017, the 57 years that passed, plastic production went from 360 tons a year to 35,370 tons a year, which is a huge increase. So in the United States, around 35,000 tons of plastic was produced, and then 26,000 tons of plastic went right into the landfill, and that's a humongous majority. And then only a little less than 3 tons of that 35,000 were recycled. So that leaves almost 6,000 tons of plastic that did not go to the landfill or get recycled. Our great invention of plastic does not disintegrate. Almost every single piece of plastic ever made is on the earth in some form or another, whether that be in our homes, on the landfill, in the oceans, in the bodies of fish and birds, in our bodies. Humans are clearly overproducing plastic. It's disgusting, to be honest with you. If you need proof, in the last 10 years, humans have produced more plastic than the 100 years before. And then going back to the year 2017, every single person consumed 300 pounds of plastic. And by consumption, it doesn't mean literally taking a plastic water bottle and eating it. It just means by buying it in some form or another. In 2017, that means that 11 billion tons of plastic was produced. That is insane. So that kind of leads me to how one person does make a difference, because every human approximately consumes 300 pounds of plastic. So if one person, just little old me or little old you, reduced your plastic consumption immensely, then that's almost 300 pounds that isn't going in the landfill, you know? And then some people say, well, it's still being made. Yes, but supply and demand, because if you don't buy it, then they're not gonna make as much. Supply and demand is a huge part of sustainability and plastic production. So yes, plastic is going into our landfills or whatever, sure, but the effects of it, even just being in your fridge, like holding the food that you're gonna eat tomorrow for lunch, is causing some stuff to go on in your body that's not great. So you probably heard of BPA, which is bisphenol A. It is a chemical that mimics estrogen, which is a hormone in the human body, and causes unnatural reactions inside us. BPA is linked to many really crappy things, which is actually such a big deal, obviously, and it's coming from the chemicals in plastic. But more than 90% of the plastics produced that don't have BPA in them still have chemicals that have hormone mimics. So it's not like you're being protected just because it says BPA free. So that means you consumed the chemicals directly. Another concern is microplastics, which are really tiny pieces of plastic that we consume in some way or another, and they cause really detrimental effects to our bodies. In 2010, the CDC found in a study that more than 90% of people aged 6 and up had BPA levels in their urine. Children aged 6 to 11 had 2 times more BPA in their urine than everyone else, which is really scary because these chemicals found in plastic cause developmental issues in children. So according to the documentary, there are over 5 trillion pieces of plastic just floating on the top of the ocean. That's just the top layer of the ocean. That means that the 2.6 billion people that rely on the ocean as their main form of protein are eating the plastics as well. The plastic that we produce and we consume as developed countries are being dumped into the bodies of water and the land that people live on that live in poverty. And it's really sad. It really is. In the documentary, it talked about a specific community near the Manila Bay where there were around 30 people living there, and 6 of them had developed cancer because they were living on a humongous pile of garbage. And that was because 1,500 tons of plastic are dumped in the Manila Bay right by where they live every single day. And they all were too poor to move away, so they kind of just had to deal with it. And I think that's such a huge environmental justice problem that people in the developed countries think that their actions have no consequences. In the United States, there's actually no legislation for plastic reduction or anything like that. Some states do have like the plastic bag tax and things like that, but in the United States as a whole country, there's no legislation, which I think is pathetic. Plastic is so harmful. I think like humans are just blind to it. As an individual, you can make a difference. Obviously, you can reduce your 300-pound consumption a year. Every time you're about to go to the grocery store, buy reusable grocery bags and bring them. Every time you are about to go to Starbucks to get a coffee, buy a reusable cup and then bring it every time. Like, there's so many different things you could do, and buying in bulk at grocery stores and not using plastic water bottles. There's so much you can do as an individual, and it really feels so good to do so. So I think it's important to push for legislation and push for change, but if that isn't coming soon enough, you can't just sit back and say, okay, I'm just gonna drink out of my plastic water bottle now, because the government won't do anything about it. And that's, I feel like, a big problem with the environmental issues of our world today. But I think just take responsibility for your individual actions with plastic, and then share them with the rest of the world, and try to promote change and say no to plastic, because we hate plastic.